Five. Greetings in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. Today I'm joined by Iver Lofving and John Peach, and we'll be discussing some peak oil discussions, particularly agriculture. Iver, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I think agriculture is going to be a real problem because right now, as we all know, it's about 10 kilocalories of fossil fuels to make 1 calorie of food energy. And I know about, a little bit about it because I used to have a maple sugar house and we used wood, but a lot of other places used fossil fuels to make their maple syrup, and they use quite a lot of it. They'd use reverse osmosis. I guess if you figured it out, they use some electricity, and they use some electricity to run their vacuum pumps and all sorts of things. And then they use fuel oil basically to boil down the maple syrup. So you end up with probably the same thing. It's probably about 1 calorie of food energy for 10 calories of fossil fuels. And the beautiful thing about it was, up until lately, it didn't matter because, we had the fossil fuels to make the food, and that wasn't a big problem. But I mean, something like maple syrup, you can run a gravity system. It could come down the hill by itself, the sap, and you could boil it off with wood. And that's what they did up until probably the 1970s or so. And now all of a sudden, any commodity whatsoever, I mean, that's just an example, any commodity requires a lot of fossil fuels to make food energy that us humans can consume. So once that becomes difficult, then what happens to food? And I think it's already happening. If you look in Pakistan, they're having a real problem, especially with the Ukraine war and stuff, getting enough wheat for people to eat. And I heard recently that the government kind of subsidized a little bit of wheat. And so they brought it to a town and everybody kind of mobbed the place. And, they're going to sell it cheaper than the price now. But I guess the price of food has doubled or gone up by quite a lot. And if you think about it, it's now hitting us. The price of eggs is up by 3 or 4 times. And
Wow.
the price, a lot of things. And that's due to, the avian flu also. But of course, all these things become an expensive thing for an average person. And, we don't really realize it, because we kind of, food is sort of part of our gig. And, here in the developed world, we get our food mostly really processed. But like a place like, Central America and in most of the Middle East, what they rely on is bags of flour. And then they make chapatis or they make tortillas, etc. So they are buying even the bulk commodity, and the bulk commodity is too expensive for most people. So that led to the Arab Spring about 10 or 15 years ago, and it could lead to some real problems now. But we just don't even hear about it here. We just hear, keep consuming and keep flying and doing everything you're doing. So I guess, we're kind of the last consumer culture, and we're just sort of sitting here, mowing it all down and stuff and not paying attention. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is really already in deep trouble. Anyway, that's what I got for right now. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
John, did you want to jump in?
Well, I was going to say that, with in Pakistan, they had those floods earlier. So they were huge trouble to begin with. And now the supply of food, that normally came from Ukraine and Russia is probably pretty disrupted. Yeah. It could be much bigger than the previous Arab Spring.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I know the thoughts I had is that for Canada, it says that on average per calorie, it's 3 fossil fuel calories per 1 calorie of food. But that is only accounting for the food from the time that it's processed to the time that it gets to the shelf. And it doesn't include the fossil fuel calories of you driving to the store and then cooking your food. So we're actually using a lot more fossil fuels than it says.
And when you say process, do you mean at the point where it's harvested or some other point? Because I mean, there's all that fossil fuel that goes into the planting and the, you know,
Oh,
collection of the crops or whatever.
yeah, I think that's not even. It doesn't even include processed foods. It's just like whole grains, fruits, meats, vegetables, that kind of stuff. And that's
Yeah.
what they were doing the calculations on. I'm sure processed foods would be much higher because they get baked and boiled and mixed and all those things. Yeah, because
Wow.
I know in Canada we have a 1-to-1 ratio even for a grain. So our like a basic grain crop, it requires 1 fossil fuel calorie to get 1 food calorie out of the ground. That's not a very good ratio. Because if you don't have fossil fuels, then you basically have no food,
Right.
and grain is the staple. So, yeah.
Yeah, it takes the Haber-Bosch process. Basically, the whole idea, most of the Green Revolution was the fact that you could just pull nitrogen out of the air, and you could fix nitrogen. Nitrogen was the hardest thing to get before fossil fuels, because where did you find it? It had to come from manure. It had to come from rotting and composting things, etc. So the Haber-Bosch process, all of a sudden, you could pull this nitrogen, which is very hard to pull out because it's really bonded really tightly. So it takes energy to pull it apart and make it useful. Anyway, that caused basically a big revolution in agriculture and made it possible. Also, the other thing about modern agriculture is you don't have to have a quarter of your farm to feed the horses and the livestock that has to move things around. So you save a little bit of land that way, but also you got nitrogen coming in from basically nowhere. And so that's why I'm always surprised I see a cornfield planted, and it's amazing. They can take, dirt that's not very good dirt, and they can just dump the nitrogen to it. And of course, the corn stalks are really close to each other. And so you can get an amazing yield out of what formerly wasn't really, it was good soil, but not fantastic, And so I think that we're sort of in this place where, we're kind of in a box canyon in a way as a culture, because that's the way we get our food is, most of it is, corn and wheat, and it's all grown with this process. And then they also kill it at the end with glyphosate. And they never used to do that, but especially in northern US and Canada, the very end of the process, they dry the product up by knocking it out with glyphosate. And glyphosate, if you think about it, is an herbicide. So it probably kills the intestinal flora in your stomach. And so that's why I try to eat only organic if I can, organic wheat, because, it didn't used to be like this. It didn't, they never would harvest the stuff so early. They would always, they wouldn't kill it with the glyphosate so it would dry up. They just wait for a dry time and pick it up. But it's become so easy to just kill it with glyphosate and then pick it all up.
So does
that's
that
why
give them the more precise time of harvest? Is that the purpose of it?
Yeah. Well, it also dries it.
Yeah.
So you have to wait to dry it.
So in a conventional growing operation, I talked to some farmers, and he explained to me that how they do it is first they glyphosate before they plant to kill all of the weeds, and then they plant their crop. And then at the end, when they're ready to harvest, on whatever day of the week they want to, then they spray it with glyphosate to kill the crop, and then they leave it for a couple days, and then after they harvest it, or they spray it again to dry it out.
Wow.
So it's 3 glyphosate applications. 2 of them are like food, like at the point of consumption, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's why there's that wheat belly thing. But I would like to also mention that I remember reading that somewhere 40 to 60% of all of the protein that humans consume comes from the Haber-Bosch process. which my understanding is they mostly use natural gas for it, and it's 400 degrees Celsius. I don't know, John Peach, do you know how it works?
I don't know what the chemical process is, but yeah, I'm pretty familiar with the fact that without the Haber-Bosch process, we would not be here. It really is supporting people right now.
Right. Yeah, like I remember reading a book by a lady from Punjab, and she was explaining that before the Green Revolution, they had many varieties of local wheat and things like that that were good at growing in their poor soils, where they'd been harvesting for thousands of years, and they could do well in those dry climates. But then the Americans came in and they're like, well, we're not making a buck off of these people using their landrace crops that they've been growing for many generations. And so they were like, you need to grow. And when they tried to add fertilizer, like conventional fertilizers to these land races, they would die because they were adapted to growing in a low nutrient environment. Whereas all of the GMO crops are high nutrient demanding. And so right now, the majority of Punjab and any place where the Green Revolution has taken hold, they have crops that require large amount of fertilizer just to get it to grow. And so that's a huge dependency. And I was reading that not only do we need lots of fossil fuels to make the ammonia, which is basically we're taking natural gas and then going through some conversion steps and then making a smaller amount of ammonia. And then for making the pesticides and the herbicides, that's even more complicated because like ammonia is very simple. It's like NH4 or something. Like it's a simple molecule, but like herbicides and those other things are much more complicated. And pesticides especially. So they're more expensive, and those prices go up even faster.
Yeah.
I heard that also, that the average person is made up of 40 to 60% nitrogen that came from the Haber-Bosch process.
Yes.
Wow.
So there's half the people on Earth are made of, nitrogen they got
fossil
from that.
fuels.
Yeah.
Really.
And I heard also that the average American, believe it or not, eats more corn nowadays than the average Mexican, because they use there's another thing that they do, which is they make high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is basically corn, so they can check it out in the average person, and we all what do we drink, a soda or something, and there's the high fructose corn syrup. They used to use sugar, and then it became cheaper to do it with that,
Yeah, it's because of the subsidies.
Yeah, subsidies. So it's a very complicated little system. I was thinking, basically we're just, corn-fed Americans, basically, and it kind of is making a whole group of people that are very reliant on fossil fuels just to continue to exist. I mean, we all are. But.
Yeah, I was reading that. That there's many kind of nutritionists and such that believe that the current obesity epidemic is related to the Roundup in the wheat and other products killing people's gut flora. It's the same process that farmers use to make cows grow faster, is by giving them antibiotics to kill their gut flora. And then that makes the cows grow faster because the bacteria in their gut are not competing for the corn that they're eating.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Fatten up for the slaughter.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the people as well, that are having, and unfortunately, they found that a lot of these overweight or obese individuals are actually at the same time malnutritioned,
right?
Because often they can't afford lettuce or other high nutrient foods, because they end up buying high calorie foods instead.
Yeah. Well, they're
Mhm.
cheaper.
Yeah, they're
You know,
cheaper. Exactly.
Dollar General or something like this and just gets whatever, and you can't get any vegetables there. But yeah, and I don't think there are very few people that know how to grow a garden anymore. I mean, I always have like 3 little gardens someplace, but very few people ever do that anymore. And it's almost become like this anachronistic little thing that you do, and they don't
If you do,
understand
it's
it.
not much. I mean, you don't get enough to really support yourself, right?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
But all summer long, it's like, I live in a sort of a remote place in the summer, but all summer long, you kind of have a little grocery store,
Mm.
You go up there, you
Yeah.
get a head of lettuce or whatever it is, you just go get it and eat it,
Yeah.
I mean, so it's kind of like, I think it's also like cultural memory, like I'm a son of an immigrant kind of, and, you always have the garden, that my grandfather always had a garden. My father always had a garden. So it's kind of like, you kind of know, I don't know if I really know, but it seems to work out okay.
Yeah.
Although it's been kind of hard the last couple of years with the dry and then pouring rain,
Right. Well, perennials are good for that, like shrubs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, the same thing that my grandmother did a lot of gardening, and we grew a lot of our own food back in the Soviet Union, because you couldn't rely on the stores to provide you food, as often the shelves were empty, and then you were eating potato peel soup in the winter to survive. Yeah. And another thing, it's good to even grow, like, I know the suburban lots are completely unsustainable and like too small to grow your own food, and definitely you can't grow your own lumber for heating or cooking. But it is good, like, even if you have like a raised bed, to at least start learning how to grow vegetables or shrubs or something, because there's a 5-year learning curve in learning to grow food. So even if we had like gave everybody enough land to grow their own food, and we gave them all the seeds that they needed and all the tools that they needed, they still wouldn't be able to do it if say for instance the stores closed tomorrow, because it's a 5-year learning curve. It's complicated, you've got to be gentle with the seeds, and you really need experience. Like, you can't explain it in the same way. Like, a lot of it is a relationship that you form with these plants that you're growing, and then like as they're growing, you've got to like talk to them, and then see if they need something and all that kind of stuff, and that just comes with experience. And so it's important that we I don't know, help people kind of transition now, so that they can kind of whet their appetite for growing their own food. And then later down the road, maybe in 5 or 10 years, when they won't, even more people won't be able to afford food from the store, they'll be able to grow their own food.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, if you go to in Europe, a lot of my relatives, they have like a little garden plot, and that's kind of like their summer house. Also, they have like a little tool shed with like tools, but they also have chairs and stuff. And so they go out to their little their little, I don't know what it is, garden plot thing, and then they set up the chairs, and they have a little I don't know, tea or something, and they have like strawberries or whatever it is. So it becomes like a little activity. Usually they're on a train line, so you take a train line out and you get to the place where the garden plots are. So I think it's a popular thing in a lot of places in Europe, and it could be here, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They tried it in our town. They tried having a few plots, but people didn't really tend them or understand or anything, So I don't know. It's hard, I think, But
yeah, it is for sure. I know that someone I know tried to get, like, we have some garden plots, and I think they're mostly managed by the mental health organizations here, and
Yeah.
so they work because they're managed. So someone tried to start more garden plots in like a public park, but the suburban people were just like, no, you can't do this, because then these mental health people will show up in our
Oh,
park, and we don't want that, because they might rob us. And so you know
Jeez.
um it,
yeah.
yeah. And I know another thing in like Toronto, where there's like basically no room. They do have like in their hydro corridors some garden plots there, but there's a lot of people already very much struggling for food. And in one of the food bank presidents said that one of the common requests they're getting for now from people who are at the food bank is they want to apply for medical assistance in dying. They want to apply for
Whoa.
euthanasia, because not being able to get enough food or housing is just too hard for them.
Jeez.
Whoa. Here in the U.S., I think we take care of that with the drug epidemic.
Oh, they just die from the
Kind of
drugs?
gruesome,
Yeah. I think that happens here too. I was talking to someone who is like homeless, and she said that, and that previous week that 3 people had died, only 2 officially, because one of the people that had died wasn't like registered or something from drug overdoses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oof.
John, do you know? Have you seen any new updates on the data for the oil or the natural gas or anything like that?
The only thing I've seen recently that was kind of interesting said that that there was talk about how the Europeans were going to be in a lot of trouble this winter because of the gas shortage, and it was kind of interesting because they said, well, they're talking it up that it's been a warm winter, and so that's helped them out. But apparently, what's really done it is that their industry has just basically gone offline. So that they are not, you know, producing steel and aluminum. That these things, these industries that require a lot of heat in the process,
Mm-hmm.
they're just shut down, and so that has freed up a lot of gas that would have otherwise gone into generating these products. And so they're getting through the winter. The houses are warm, but that can't go on forever that way. And they were lucky that they were able to fill the tanks, pretty much to where they normally are. But next year, years after that, there doesn't seem to be any real good solution to getting them natural gas.
Mm.
The other thing, I don't know, I've never found the kind of data for natural gas that it seems to be more or less available for oil. And we had talked about this before, that it would be kind of neat to have that data available so that we could do some analysis on it. But I don't know where it is. It just not as good. Of course, oil data is not really all that good either. But it's nowhere near. I mean, oil data is much better than gas data.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like I've seen like my charts. I mean the charts around the world, and it seems like they're on like a per well basis, and that the well pressure stays for a natural gas well stays high until it's almost completely depleted. Uh,
Yeah,
it, and so it's very difficult for them to ascertain how much gas is left, except by if they have many wells and then some of them go offline, then they're like, oh well, then those reserves are done. And then but they have to basically wait until it's completely empty, and then they can say, okay, it's done.
yeah,
But they don't know how much is left, because
yeah,
it's a light gas, and so it just presses up, and so it always feels like there's enough. Whereas oil, it's a liquid, so it stays down. It doesn't press up, and so the pressure changes in a more predictable fashion.
Mm-hmm.
I've also heard that the solution they say for Europe is to use LNG. And I've heard that no matter what you do, that LNG is a lot more expensive than natural gas, especially coming from a pipeline or something,
Yeah.
because the LNG tanker itself uses something like a tenth of that LNG just getting across to where it's going. They use it to propel the tanker, and then they have to put it in another, it's really, really cold. They have to keep it cold, so that costs a little bit. And then you have to repressurize it or return it back into natural gas on the other end. So there's no way that Europe is ever going to have the same, price of energy. It gets turned into electricity and things. I guess, how can you possibly? It'll be much more expensive.
Yeah, there is no way that LNG is going to fill in. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised actually that there hasn't been an accident to the Norwegian lines. That.
Oh, the accident was only to the Russian lines, eh?
Yeah. And there's some natural gas that comes from Africa to Spain, and then some another line into Italy. But I think the bulk of natural gas coming in now is from Norway, and it's another undersea pipeline, just like the Nord Stream 1 and 2. And geez, it would not be that difficult for somebody to, depth charge it or something. And
well, I heard it's a real problem because up until now, nobody, would mess with a piece of infrastructure like that. So all of a sudden, it becomes this sort of weird Cold War thing where, you actually, I'm not saying, I have no idea why it blew up or whatever, but, it becomes one of these things where somebody is messing with somebody else's infrastructure, which is really, it used to be kind of off the table unless you're in an actual hot war,
Yeah.
I'm kind of worried about it because I have relatives that live right, off of there. They live in Denmark and not far off of, this was right off of the coast of Bornholm, which is not far from Sweden either. So it's kind of must be really scary over there. Just unsettling. Then
it was scary for us is the attacks on the electrical substations. And there was probably 10 or 15 years ago that said that an attack like this, if done sort of properly, I think it was something like 7 substations. If you did it, if you knew what you were doing and you could coordinate the attacks, it would only take 7 substations to take off the country.
Wow.
Well, it wasn't too long ago a squirrel took out like all of the Northeast of the U.S., But the scary thing is it's apparently like ideologically driven or something.
Yeah.
They want to kind of create chaos or something, and then they got some kind of crazy thing. And so you think about it, it's like, it's sort of like the other thing, if, civilization is built on, kind of a little bit of trust, all of a sudden you have these, really crazy people deciding to, I don't think it's an effective tactic to make me feel warm and fuzzy for them or anything.
Right.
Yeah, I actually, I know what you're talking about. And unfortunately, there's been a reduction of trust of the elite or whatnot. Like, I remember the World Economic Forum lady at some point, she was saying that the goal was to help make partnerships between governments and business, and we have increased the amount of trust between governments and business. However, we have greatly reduced the amount of trust between the citizenry and the elite, because They're talking about stuff and nobody knows what it is. And I actually saw one of these substation attacks in Brazil. And the people who were conducting the substation attack were told that the substation was a HARP weather modification installation, but they just couldn't tell the difference. And so they destroyed their own electrical substation.
Wow.
And like, it's possible to, find these people who don't know any better and then I guess mobilize them in that way, unfortunately. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I'm not really sure what to do about that. But it's good to keep people, I guess, informed, what a substation looks like, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe you don't want to pay too much attention to it.
I think it's
But,
pretty obvious. I mean, you got all the power
yeah,
lines
yeah.
going in and out, right?
I mean,
Mhm.
what about some little cameras? They should put cameras on the thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think that's how they got the footage, is that there were security
Yeah.
cameras, and then like a bunch of Brazilians showed up and then just started knocking the substation towers over. And it's like, oh, well, those are
No,
hard to fix.
Yeah, it's
Well,
hard to,
it's
hard
like
to figure out.
transformers that are hard.
Yeah. Only
They shoot the transformers, and then the oil leaks out, and they overheat, and then they melt down. And
Oh, okay.
getting a replacement one takes months if you have the power to do it. That was the whole point of the coordinated attack, was that if you did that, then there would be months of no power, and there'd be no power to rebuild them. And so
No,
you
it's
basically
because they need the transformers in order to do
Right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them are custom made for that place.
Mhm.
So it isn't just like getting another part and putting it in. But it's scary because you just realize, like, one of the basics is, I just feel like I'd like to live in a place where there's electricity as long as possible.
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe I'm just, call me bourgeois or something, but I kind of like, the idea of seeing, I don't know, talking to you guys on the internet or whatever.
Yeah. So I guess the best thing for it would be to have like local grids. Like say a hydroelectric, we know is kind of the least or the most reliable, that pretty much everybody agrees the hydroelectric can continue into the future. And so, for instance, here in Gray County, we've got a 4.5 megawatt hydroelectric plant. So if they set it up so that it won't go down if the grid goes down, then we'll at least still have some local power to maybe make some transformers or whatever it is that we need in order to get the grid to come back up.
Mhm.
Well, I agree with you. Like, microgrids would make a lot of sense. Even a very, very small microgrid, maybe like, a little solar and a little wind and, different things. You could run a house or two off of it. But the problem is, they say that the grid is the most, what is it they say? It's the most complicated machine ever created. You think about all the line workers going around and fixing things. And, it is a very complicated situation. And, like with most things in modern society, it'd be nice if we could simplify, but I almost think it's hard to simplify back to the way things were, Not that the way things were that great. I've been to places where they had very intermittent electricity or none at all. And, they'd turn the lights off at 6 or 8 o'clock. Everybody just go to bed. 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody go to bed. And so, it's good, but then, your water pump only works for a certain amount of time. So everybody would just fill they call them pilas. They'd fill their sinks for a certain amount of time. Everything worked. It was, the good thing about it is it was so simple, but
it's hard. Yeah, I know my relatives in Ukraine, because the Russians are always bombing the electrical stations, and so they have very intermittent electricity that goes out at random times, and then it can come back on sometimes for only an hour at a time. And so like one of where my aunt, well, we managed to get her over to Canada, but where she lived near Kiev is one of the most heavily bombarded parts of Kiev. And she says that her friends that still live there, they only have 1 hour a day on average, and during that 1 hour they fill up a bunch of buckets of water. Like that's their priority. And then they have like wood stoves for cooking and things like that, because obviously well, you need some way to do it.
Yeah.
So it's important to have those high efficiency wood stoves so you don't have to use as much wood. And like a pressure cookers are also awesome because you can use so much less wood. Like for beans are necessary for protein, and they're much less kind of require much less space than growing meat. But if you were to use a regular pot, it would take, say, 2 hours to boil pinto beans. But in order to use, if you use a pressure cooker, it's 3 minutes.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. 2 hours, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, so
like it was like the primitive, the precursor of the microwave. I know I used to use a pressure cooker in Central America all the time. And then I was across the street buying some beers at the local tienda or something. And all of a sudden, all the windows, I hear this poof, and all the windows kind of went black. Beans. I go over there, and this poor girl who was visiting, like she's like covered with beans. I don't know what happened to the pressure cooker.
Yeah, well, those were the first generation pressure cookers.
Oh
yeah. And so I have Futura, and they have this kind of thing where the lid, it's like the shape of an oval, and so you like put it in kind of at an angle, and so you physically can't open the lid when it's at pressure. Good. And so there's no risk of you unscrewing it and then it flying out on your face. Like I've definitely heard of cases of people getting like burns and stuff from.
She didn't, which was good.
Well, yeah.
I handed her a beer.
Very, very, very lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I used to use it all the time. That was my.
Yeah. We use it all the time for most of our meals.
Yeah,
because even for grains, it's great. Like it cuts down cooking times usually at least threefold. For beans, well, a lot more.
Oh yeah.
Wow. I have to look back into it. I was like, we had a pressure cooker when I was a kid, and there was this little weight that went on the vent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you put anything like beans in there, the bean skins or whatever would clog that vent up, and that's when the thing got.
Oh yeah, and then it would like kind of yeah. So there's been many kind of innovations since then, and these Futura pressure cookers I have like those like first generation ones that have a weight, and then like when the pressure gets too hot, then it releases a little pressure, and it's extremely loud. It's extremely loud. So you can't really be in the kitchen unless you have like ear protection, when the pressure cooker is on. But this new Futura, what it has is it's kind of like on a lever or something. So instead of like being silent and then making an extremely loud noise, it just like has a low hissing sound. It's like like while it's cooking. And so it's like, wow, well, yeah, and I can be in the kitchen at the same time, and it's awesome.
That sounds good. Yeah, I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah,
that would be here's one of those things that might make a lot of sense in the near future here.
Yeah. The Hawkins is the brand, and Futura is their kind of top of the line pressure cooker. And it's so top of the line, it was in part of a New York City art exhibit.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a new stove recently that is induction, and that has been really nice. It's the advantage to having a gas heat on your stove is that it would heat things up very quickly. the downside, obviously, is that you get all kinds of nasty chemicals. But the induction comes up just about as fast as gas does, and no side effects.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that's good to bring that up, because most of these future Hawkins pressure cookers are aluminum, so they won't even work with an induction stove. But they do have, I think, a stainless steel one that will work. So if you're looking to buy one, just make sure you get one of the induction stove compatible versions.
Yeah, yeah.
Will it work on a wood stove?
Oh yeah, for sure. They're black. The Futuras are black, so they absorb heat really well from a fire.
Hmm.
And it's anodized aluminum, so it's kind of it's food safe. So none of the aluminum gets in your food. But yeah, you do have to use a wooden utensil to scoop things out, so you don't scratch off the enamel.
Oh, that sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna check it out, because I don't know, all these little things, you could figure out these little things, and I think it can make a huge difference.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
Yeah.
In the future that's coming, whether we like it or not, you kind of figure out little ways of figuring out a way to kind of do things.
Make the transition easier.
Yeah, and I personally don't feel like you have to grow all your own food or do all this or whatever. I think if you just figure out a few ways of cutting it down, that'll help, or figure out a way to maybe live a little easier or lighter,
Yeah,
But
there's a lot of things that will help, for sure. And I mean, like, ideally you would have somewhat of a trade economy. Like, some people may be better at growing wheat, like maybe some Amish that have horses and have been doing this for many generations, and then like some other people who ideally have enough land as well, could be growing wood. Anyone can grow wood. And like, I know a lot of people don't know about coppicing, and so so some kind of coppicing tutorial or whatever will help them. And that will help as well. And you mentioned the price of eggs recently, and so having your own chickens would make it much easier for people to get their eggs, because they could just produce their own. I remember seeing a meme, and it was saying we could start using eggs as currency. And I went to the store, and it was like, it's not that far off. One egg is like between 30 to 50 cents. So 2 to 3 eggs is $1.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, there's also the fact that, I mean, the part of the price increase on eggs has been because of the avian flu, which is caused, well, I mean, not caused by, but I mean, exacerbated by the fact that it's, these industrial farms of chickens, right? And so if you decentralize the chicken farming, having a few in your backyard, they're much less likely to be catching flu from another chicken, right?
Yeah. And
So,
I think more importantly, they're less likely to have the federal government go in and kill the chickens. Because that's basically what's been happening with a lot of these chicken farms, is that they come in, they test one of the chickens, and they're like, oh, yeah, they got a positive PCR test or whatever it is they're testing for the flu. And it's like, okay, now you have to kill all your chickens.
right.
That really raises the price.
Yep.
Yeah. And if for a smaller establishment, like, it's not really the government's business if people are just eating it themselves.
Yeah.
yeah, I used to vaccinate chickens for the in the Peace Corps. I'd like put little droppers in the eye, like, and I charge like a penny or something.
Huh.
I guess
Wow.
they told me I should charge a penny, But,
well, I did hear that there's like some of those chicken vaccines backfired, and that they were kind of like these leaky vaccines. I don't remember the exact disease, but it because it was leaky, when the vaccinated chickens would give it to each other, it would be like a little cold But then when an unvaccinated chicken got this, it would die within 6 hours. And so,
Oh.
yeah. And whereas before they started the vaccination, it was a cold for all the chickens. It was just a short cold. And then they survived. So, there's a, you
I
kind of
don't
have to weigh your options. But for a small
I
chicken
was
farm that's isolated, I don't think they really need to worry about those things because they're not exposed to other birds or whatever.
not as much, except that some of the things that's spreading the avian flu right now is other birds.
Mhm.
So other birds come in and they fly in and they hang out, But I don't know. I mean, I found that like we used to sell chickens also. So we'd sell these special chickens and stuff. And then the old ladies would always ask, they'd ask, can I have some black? I want all black ones, right? And so I'd tell them, you can't have all black ones because I know what you're going to do with the black ones. You're going to take it into a cave and you're going to sacrifice it so that you get more corn, supposedly. So you got to take some red ones and some black ones. So you're like, oh,
What is
yeah.
this some kind of strange ritual or?
Yes. And one time we went caving and we're deep in the middle of the cave and all of a sudden we come upon like a bowl of like chicken blood or something with like little bones sticking out of it. We're like, ah!
Oh my gosh. Wow. That is strange.
No. Yeah, so we got out of there really quickly, but it was like really creeped us out. We're like, ah!
Yeah, I remember in Thailand they really valued black chickens. They said they tasted better than other kinds of chickens, but they take longer to grow.
Yeah, these didn't last very long at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because the black ones were the ones that
everybody wanted.
They all whoever the witch doctors wanted or something. So I tried to kind of keep. It was Heifers International would give us the chicken, so they're like bolsas picuarias.
Oh, this was in Venezuela, in
Guatemala.
In Guatemala, yeah, it was South America.
The Mayan people. But they were amazing. They were amazing just the way that they lived. I mean, really, they lived the same way they'd lived for the last 1,000 years. So, they were up there surviving the way they always had, growing corn, beans, and squash, and having chickens and
nice.
Things
like
that.
They have a very sustainable corn, bean, squash, and they have some other stuff around it as well. And I know in Ukraine, I watched some Ukrainian farmers, and well, unsurprisingly, they're very similar to my family. Like they had their kind of main crop, and then around it, they had fruits and trees and things like that. So, I mean, that's like, oh, that's just like me and my family.
Yeah, see, I mean, this is a pattern that can work. That's what I think is, and I think teaching kids, that's the most important thing, is teaching the next generation or kids or people how to do some of this stuff is going to be key. I mean, that's, like I said the last time, I said that's my main thing, is teaching people, what I know, useful skills. I'm not going to be around that much longer. So, I mean, I'll be around for a little while, but what I mean? It's not like, I'm going to worry about peak oil as much for myself, and I'm worried about it for people I know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we have just a few minutes left. Was there any other topics you guys want to address, John or Iver?
No, this has been really great.
Mm-hmm.
Glad to catch up with you guys.
Yeah. John, I got to say, your talk was devastating. It was almost like I had learned about peak oil all over again.
Sorry.
Because you just realized, no, it was great. It was really good. I mean, that's what, and Michael Dowd's talk also, I mean, I just realized, okay, yeah, that's where we're at, and I kind of like, it was interesting because I kind of just figuring out the shape of the future, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is like learning not to fight the future or the present, and like not to try to claw your way back to the past that's already gone. The analogy I like to use is it's like surfing, and it's like when you're going up the wave, it's pretty easy ride. but then when you're going down the wave, you've got to stay balanced, and you've got to look forward. You can't look behind you, and while you're surfing, otherwise you're going to fall off, and then you're going to, well, hopefully not drown, but it's a possibility, and or just like downhill skiing, if you were like downhill skiing, but then you were like, no, I want to go back up the hill,
Right,
and it's like,
ski.
you're gonna like, have all these bloody fingers, and it's like, don't do that. No, just ski down in a safe way, and it's gonna be all right. And then like once you get to the bottom, then you can go back up again. But you got to stay in peace while you're going down. And I think that's a good analogy for going down this descent.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we really ought to be spending more time thinking about how to survive with declining energy rather than trying to figure out how we can maintain the current civilization. Because I mean, it's just completely unsustainable. Even if we did have more energy, it would be a disaster, right?
Yeah.
And like everybody got so excited about the Lawrence Livermore experiment with the fusion, right? Oh, this is going to be the future. It's going to be cheap energy, blah, blah, blah. Well, the biosphere is collapsing. So why do we really want any more energy?
Yeah.
What will we do with it?
Mm-hmm. Good point. Yeah, and I really liked your graphic where it was showing that if we do 2% growth for 300 years, then our planet will be the temperature of boiling water, and within 800 years, it'll be the temperature of the sun. And it's like, we don't want free energy or whatever. It's like infinite sources of energy because we can't radiate that much heat. We need to just learn to live within kind of the limits of the planetary ecosystem. And that requires us forming a relationship with the planet and the plants and the animals, instead of having an adversarial relationship of us versus nature. It's like us with nature. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons that I prefer to use as many wild animals as possible rather than having domestic animals, because a lot of the time when people have domestic animals, then they put themselves in an adversarial relationship with the wild animals which live there naturally, because they're like, oh, that wolf is eating my sheep, but the sheep don't belong in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, or those ermine are eating my chickens, and it's like, well, these chickens are from India. Like the ruffed grouse are the chicken of the north, and they're good at, they can evade being eaten by ermine because they fly up, and they can get up into the trees. And like there's also northern bobwhite quail that produce a bunch of eggs, and they also are native and are egg producers. So there's many options to kind of live more cooperatively and less antagonistically.
Yep.
I agree. There's more than one way to skin a cat here.
Yeah. Or grow your own food or meat or yeah.
And the thing is, may you live in interesting times. That's the big thing is, that's what I've begun to realize lately is I listen to people all the time, and they're talking about how they're going to be flying off to everywhere and doing everything and all this stuff. And, I kind of think in the back of my mind, I don't know.
I don't know if you're going to be able to do that. Yeah. So sometimes I see like these people with these big plans. Like I was just at a county council meeting, and they want to make one of those hydro pump stations. And then like because of public stuff, it's going to be an underground hydro pump station that's going to go to the deep water, and then they're going to have an underwater cable that's going to cross several counties, and it's like, this is so elaborate, and they're like, we might start by 2025. I'm like, you know what, this is probably never going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, because we just won't have the resources for doing those things. And they were like, it can support 5,000 megawatts of energy. It's like, we only produce 4 or 5 from our hydroelectric dam. Like, you don't need to store that much electricity.
Yeah.
I keep quiet though, usually, because I just find, okay, talking about it, it's like all of a sudden you're I don't know, creating a big bummer or something, that you don't really want to tell them that, like, yeah, I don't think so.
Well, I think that's one of the things I really liked about the Michael Dowd talk, is that he was like, about that collapse acceptance, that once you accept that we're going in decline or whatnot, then you just kind of like open your heart and see what you can do now for other people, because you don't know if there is going to be a future. But while you're still here, you might as well be nice to people. You might as well help them as much as you can. And who knows, maybe by helping, the plants and the animals and the people all at the same time, then you will create a future that is viable.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
All right.
We know what the shape of the future is, but we don't exactly know what's going to happen.
Right. Right.
It's really interesting to know the shape of the future. I mean, nobody, around you really does, so it's interesting just to know that, But, I mean, I remember discovering another thing about the climate change. It takes 80 calories of heat to melt 1 gram of water from ice to, water, right?
Yeah.
That same 80 calories takes that same water up to 80 degrees, centigrade, which is almost boiling.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the energy to melt it, you know how they always talk about everything melting, the green, the glaciers and things. Well, the next step is, if you have a blue Arctic, it goes to the same temperature. It goes to way hotter than everywhere else. So,
Right. Yeah.
24 hours of sunlight. So once I learned that, it's so simple, and yet I was just like, oh, okay, this climate change.
We're in trouble.
Right. Yeah. There.
Have you ever seen that there was a Humble Oil ad that they ran back in the 60s, I think, or maybe it was even earlier than that, but they showed a picture of a glacier, and then the ad said, we produce enough energy every day to melt, I don't know, 7,000 tons of this ice. And we're
Oh my
and
gosh.
if you look at that thing and you think, that thing is gone now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They did it.
I know there used to be alligators on Ellesmere Island, which is the northernmost island closest to the Arctic. And well, hopefully we won't get there. But apparently during that time, the largest mammal alive was only like 16 pounds, because they just couldn't get any bigger because it was too hot. And that was the size of a horse. That was the size of a horse, So like, it was them and mice, I guess.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing, is things have changed over many, many years. You just millennia. Back then, the carbon in the air was way higher. Also, the CO2.
Yeah.
So,
it was like 3 or 4% or something. 3 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, the whole planet could support a much hotter temperature from all the way from pole to pole. But now we can't, because the sun is heating up. And
exactly.
We can't. We have to have something to, the ice ages and different things were sort of a way to kind of keep the place cool, but we've kind of blown that out of the water.
Yeah.
Humans.
So actually, that's one of the things that gives me hope about collapse, is that if we collapse soon enough, then the ecosystem has a better chance of surviving.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having that planned kind of transition into kind of a livable world kind of gives us the ideal best of both worlds.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that it's the way it should be. It's the way it should be. peak oil thing used to seem like a disaster to me, and now it seems like that's the only way we're going to cool out.
Yeah. It's as Princess Leia says, "You're our only hope." well, maybe not our only, but one of the biggest ones for sure right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to end in just a few seconds. So I'm going to do the outro. It's
Okay.
So I leave you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one infinite creator. Adonai.
Thank you. Amen.
Good night.